A wise old owl sat in an oak. The more he saw, the less he spoke. The less he spoke, the more he heard. So let's be like that wise old bird. Now, when Constantine was the emperor, he signed the Edict of Milan, and that allowed Christians to practice their religion freely and in safety. This was a great day for them because they had been persecuted for many years for practicing their religion, and that meant that they were punished. For those years, they had to practice in secret, and now they were allowed to come out into the open and say aloud, "I am a Christian," and realize that they weren't going to be hurt for that. Now, when this happened, the Christians decided they wanted places to practice their religion together, and so they began to build churches in all of the cities and towns across the Empire of Rome. And as this happened, other people who had not been Christian started to see that it was safe to hear and think about these ideas. And so some of them went and they learned more about this religion and decided it was for them. And so they changed. And that meant the Christians were growing. Now, as this happened, the leaders of the churches, the priests, decided they needed some way to be united together and to send the same message and do the same type of things. So they decided they should organize themselves. Now, in a town that had more than one church, because there was a lot of people there might be 2 churches, there might be 6 churches, they decided that one person would be in charge of all those churches, and they called them a bishop. Now, sometimes there were towns and cities that were close together, and if they wanted to be united and organized together, they would decide to have one person in charge of all the churches in all of those towns or cities, and they called that person the archbishop. So the archbishop would talk with the bishops, and the bishops would talk with the priests, and they all had a similar message, something that united them and kept them organized. Now, during this time, Constantine decided to move the capital of Rome to Byzantium. And when this happened, the leadership of Rome was no more. People had counted on the emperor being there, along with the Senate and all of the political things that would run the city and run the empire. But without them there was this lack of leadership. Now, the people were seeing that the Bishop of Rome was a very powerful person indeed. He was in charge of a lot of people and a lot of churches, and so people turned to the Bishop of Rome as somebody who was a man of importance. And so the church became more important than it had at any other time like any kind of church became more important than any other time in Roman history. Now, this Bishop of Rome, the very first Bishop of Rome, happened to be a disciple of Jesus. He was one of the 12 disciples named Peter. Now, they decided that this Bishop of Rome would be the chief priest of all of the Christian churches. And that continues to this day. And today we call that person the Pope. And he lives in Vatican City, which is inside of Rome itself. Now, when Julian became emperor, we know that he had grown up a Christian, but then turned away from that and went to look at the old religions, the old Greek gods, which turned into the Roman gods. Now, the Christians called him Julian the Apostate, and apostate means to turn away from your religion. Now, he allowed the Christians to continue practicing, so they were able to continue doing what they were doing. But Julian said, I really want to have people drawn to this religion and these ideas. And so he decided to do that. He should organize all of the Greek ideas into one religion. Now, in the past, that hadn't necessarily been the case. There were many different gods and goddesses, and they all had their own temples, and they all had their own priests and priestesses, and they didn't necessarily all work together. They didn't send the same message. So, Julian said, all right, I'm going to be the leader of this Greek religion, and I'm going to bring everybody together, and we're all going to send the same messages. But these temples, and the priests and priestesses in them were not open to those ideas. They didn't want to work together. They saw themselves as separate, even though they were similar. So, in the end, Julian was not able to bring Rome back to the ideas of the Greek and Roman gods. Now, he also happened to be interested in growing the empire. For many years, Rome defended its borders against people who were trying to get in or disrupt the empire, but they weren't trying to grow. Now, Julian had other ideas. He was ready to go and conquer some more. He decided the way to do that was to advance into Asia, and that meant fighting the Persians. Now, the Persians were a very formidable enemy, and so Julian knew he needed a large army, and he gathered about 65,000 troops, and he got them over to the edge of the Roman Empire in the east, and they attacked. But they were just not prepared. They were not organized well, and they were not ready for the environment of hot, dry places. That was where they were fighting in Persia. And so they ended up losing, and they started to retreat. While they were retreating, all of a sudden, a spear flies out of nowhere, and it hits Julian in the side, piercing his liver. Now, nobody knows where this spear came from, but the next day, Julius died of his wounds. Now, he had only been emperor for 20 months. That's a very short reign. And he also happened to be the last emperor to oppose the Christian church. And so from this time on, the Christian church was very prominent in the Roman Empire. And that is the end of this story.